YouTube. It's time for a tarot video in which I wanted to talk a little bit about intuition and sort of trusting yourself or trusting your hands, and the way I feel about the idea of a mulligan or a bad shuffle. So I don't know if that term, like pulling a mulligan, I don't know if that's something that other people use, but basically that's the term I use, or I've heard used, like if you're shuffling cards and stuff comes up like all in order or something that seems like a bad shuffle, then you say, oh, I'm going to call a mulligan and I'm going to reshuffle it. And I recently had an experience with this. I was doing a deck interview with the Wayfarer's Tarot, and when I put the cards down, they were almost all in order. And I had shuffled thoroughly, but it had come in order. So my brain, of course, wants to say, oh, like I made a mistake. I didn't shuffle the cards well enough. I should reshuffle them and go again because this isn't the real reading, or this isn't really the deck speaking to me. The brain loves that idea. Like the brain loves mulligans. The brain wants to think about probability and statistics and, how likely is it that things would be in order? Like how likely is it that things are supposed to be in order versus a quote-unquote bad shuffle. But I happen to believe, and it's totally fine if you don't, but my belief is that there's no such thing as a bad shuffle. So I think that if, or I should say I feel, that if I trust my intuition and if I trust my hands and that there's something working or there's something happening when I shuffle and pull cards, I think the deck can speak through your hands in a lot of different ways. So I think, for example, that maybe the deck could actually speak through stuck together cards, through not letting you separate them, through keeping them in order because they're supposed to stay in order, or through, like, let's say you accidentally throw all the cards on the floor. Like maybe the deck needed a better reshuffle. Or I even think, and this is probably more controversial, but I would even say I think a deck should have all its cards, and I wouldn't like start working with a deck if I consciously knew that it was missing cards. But I think a deck could lose cards intentionally, or like I've taken them out of the box before and done a whole reading and then realized there was a couple cards left in the box, and I just took that as I wasn't meant to work with those cards at that time. I wasn't meant to see those cards at that time. That they were left out for a reason. So that's obviously a more like, that's a way of thinking about tarot that does ascribe some power to the cards themselves. I know a lot of people work with guides, and for me, I think I work with my decks. Like my decks are my guides, or are a proxy for my guides. So I don't think of guides so much as beings or entities. I mean, I do. I guess it's kind of connected. It's like, rather than separate beings or entities, I think of my guides as being the decks, and not necessarily just the decks in my collection. Like I could swap them all out tomorrow and have different decks, but I to me, there's not really a separability between guides and decks, and so I do think that the decks can work in different ways, including pulling cards that seem like there's no way I could have shuffled and got that. So with the Wayfarer, like I got this. I do 2 deck interviews each time. I do a 6-card. I do a 6-card spread that I got from Little Red Tarot, and I do a 4-card spread from Lindsay Mack. And one of them is more kind of about the deck in general, and the other one is a little more about my future relationship with the deck. And so I did the first one. I got that strange, almost all in order, and then I did the second interview, and at first glance, like my first thought was, these are totally different. Like these 2 interviews seem to be saying totally different things. And I think the brain, again, was like a lot of times I could feel my brain trying to be like pessimistic and like, no, skeptical, and your brain will do that. Like your brain interacts with your spirit or your higher self all the time, and that's okay and that's normal. And like, I don't think we should punish our brain for doing that. Like, our brain is just trying to help us survive. That's great. Like, good on you, brain. I would like to survive. Thank you. But I think that, so there was that kind of clash, and then I realized, when I thought more on the two readings side by side, I realized a really surprising connection, and I figured out how these two kind of like Lego together, even though they didn't seem to have any relationship to each other at all. And I got out of the second reading, which my brain might have wanted to believe was the more correct reading because the cards were less, like, they weren't in order. But I never would, like, it elevated that. The first reading elevated the second reading and gave me a completely different interpretation. And I wholly believe that those two readings were what I was supposed to receive at that time. And so if I had just thrown it out and reshuffled, then I wouldn't have gotten that. So that's kind of where I come down on it. Like, I talked a little bit, I did a post recently on Instagram talking about kind of wondering if there's a correlation between people being trusting of others and people being self-trusting, because I think I have a very high, it's been very easy for me, even though I didn't think of myself as a quote-unquote intuitive person, it's been very easy for me to connect with trusting myself and like trusting my hands with tarot. And I think in part because like I'm just generally very trusting. Like I will give people a lot of benefit of the doubt. Like I will let people mess up multiple times before I start to doubt their intentions. Sometimes a little to my detriment, although I'm pretty good with boundaries too. So I think it works out all right. And that's the trait about myself that I like and that I'm proud of, is that I do tend to let people in and trust people. And I do the same thing for myself. And so like, even though I didn't think of myself as intuitive, like I definitely my whole life have had things where it's like I just knew, or like I felt like there was a practice I needed to do, like sometimes very strange little rituals when I was a kid, but I would just trust that they were right. And so that's kind of carried over to the tarot. So I just wanted to put that out there, kind of as a, like, if that's not the point of view that you've been working from, or if you sometimes like wonder if you're shuffling wrong, or like don't trust your hands, or think, oh, what, like if you ever had that feeling, I sometimes have that feeling when you cut the deck and your hand slips a little and you cut a different place than you were originally going to, and then it's like, shoot, was I supposed to cut there? What was I? But I think that's like it's almost ascribing too much control to your hands or to your brain, like thinking that you could just like pick the place that you should be cutting, or like pick how you should be shuffling, and thinking that you could have a bad shuffle and that you need to fix it. I feel like is that framework says that you are consciously in control and that you need to fix the way you're doing it, whereas for me, I don't think that's how it works. I don't think that's how a shuffle works. So, food for thought. I'd love to hear what you think. Leave a comment below. Is this like also your perspective, or do you reshuffle? Like, how do you think about the relationship between the tarot reading and the like physical actions of your hands and where your brain is at the time? I'd be curious to hear back. And if you enjoy this kind of content, don't forget to like and subscribe, and let me know if there's any particular tarot topics that you'd like to hear about in the future.